and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. We will be diving into quite a bit of news today. If you guys could just give me 1 second, trying to catch up here. Okay. Just had to post something real quick. Running a little behind. Okay. Now, we have Obama sending 250 troops to Syria. And sorry, I'm having a little issue here. And we see that, you know, this war continues. Again, I've always claimed, you know, there's a military-industrial complex that there are people, the puppet masters behind the scenes, reaping benefits in many different ways, financial, you know, power. And it's something that since the great wars that America was in, World War I and II, we see that it's just continued, and now we don't even have to declare war on anybody. We don't actually have a declaration of war. We just go, you know, we have to do humanitarian aid in the way of dropping bombs to get rid of these dictators, only to have these radicalists take power. So we need to really actually hone in on, you know, these issues are not changing between different candidates, different parties. And I think we have to really realize, you know, that we have a secret government, and that is what is controlling a lot of things. Without the IRS and taxation and theft, the military wouldn't have the funds to do what it does. Government gives the funds to the military, and they can choose to do with it what they want. I do want to get into this Ron Paul Liberty Report. Wartime, Washington lives in luxury. Guess who pays the bills? And it really gets into some of the issues, including 9/11, where that really even completely changed how we were looking at enemies and how we were looking at freedoms and rights as a populace. Because after that, now we weren't going after dictators and countries per se. We were going after, little radical groups. And that's really something that revolutionized how wartime just continues and persists, because we're fighting more of ideology rather than, a actual, current threat. But in the evolution of what's been going on over the years, we've helped also create that threat that now is, established more than, some people in a cave. So, we need to really stop and think and go, we were against a lot of this stuff. Back in 2008, the anti-war, and bam, Obama gets in office, Nobel Peace Prize, goes into multiple countries. Hillary Clinton helps. They actually look at her as a possible candidate. It really boils down to, we will continue to be at war as long as society allows people to reap the benefits of these wars and propagandize us into war. And that goes for every country. But let's go ahead and get into this Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today as co-host is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. Daniel, we have a very special guest today, Kelly Vlahos, and she's somebody who's been very interested in writing about the important issues like national defense, wasteful spending, even health matters. So I find her fascinating, and she does a lot of freelance writing, and she's with us today. Kelly, welcome to our program.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, good. We were glad to have you here. The thing that caught our attention this past week was the article that you had published in the American Conservative magazine. That's how wartime Washington lives in luxury. I would have never guessed. So this is such a shock to me that this is happening. So what are you revealing to us? So tell us a little bit about that article.
Sure. Well, I mean, on one hand, you might think, okay, this is an old story. After 9/11, I mean, billions of dollars of federal taxpayer money had gone into the Washington, D.C. region to fight the global war on terror, whether it be the Homeland Security state at home or the wars overseas, cybersecurity, and everything attached to that. So we've been seeing this sort of boon in the Washington, D.C. area for now almost 15 years. But what's interesting about the current state of the Beltway land is that despite a terrible recession in 2008, a financial collapse, the burst of the real estate market, this area has not only survived it, but it has thrived in it. And it is because this contracting boon, these federal procurement dollars that are not only going into D.C. proper, but into Virginia and Maryland contracting companies, has continued unabated, despite the Chicken Littles, over sequestration and budget tightening. There has been just an enormous amount of money in this area. And it's not only related to war, but it's also related to politics, the politics of war. And those politics have been greased, so to speak, by Citizens United and campaign finance laws that have allowed limitless sums of money to go into campaigns, into super PACs, which have afforded, this sort of slushing of money to ensure that the candidacies and incumbencies of members of Congress here and senators. So you've had quite an ecosystem created from war that continues to today. And that's basically what was writing about in my piece.
Yes, and I think the important point I got from your article is we talk a lot about the military-industrial complex, but I think we sort of have it fixed in our mind that it's, several big companies that build military weapons and not realizing how pervasive this is. And I think that's what your article does. It shows that this is big business for sure and a big political business. And Daniel, I believe, has a question for you here.
Well, thanks for joining us, Kelly. I think I first came across your writing, or I first came to notice when you did that excellent article on the burn pits in Iraq a number of years ago. And I just thought it was terrific reporting, of which there's not a lot these days. Everyone has an opinion. Nobody wants to pound the pavement and get the answers. So if you remember, we had you up to Dr. Paul's office for one of his famous Thursday lunches where you got to talk to a bunch of members. And it really was memorable. So we have fond memories of that. When I saw this article, of course, I always follow your writing, but also, I've known Mike Lofgren for a number of years. He's, a matter of fact, one of the first people I met when I came to D.C., and Mike's a terrific guy with a terrific new book about the deep state. So I thought this is going to be a great article. And maybe I like it because this is something we've concentrated on, which is the idea of the American people getting ripped off at the expense of the Washington elites. And I remember right after 9/11, all of these magazines started popping up, Homeland Security jobs and seminars, and it was such a boon. People, all of a sudden became experts, huge jobs. But one of the things that related to that was pointed out in the article, and both you and Mike pointed it out, is that, the government employees, that's one thing. A lot of people employed by the government in D.C., they get great salaries, but really good job security as well. But that's kind of peanuts compared to what Mike calls the deep state. And those are, as he pointed out in your article, K Street, the lawyers, political consultants, the Beltway fixers, the war on terrorism profiteers. And this is where the McMansions are born. Isn't that right, Kelly?
Right, exactly. And I think, and I was going to bring up Mike too, because he is sort of the founder of our feast here. He wrote the book Deep State. I've had some extensive conversations with him, and he had written a few excerpts about Beltway land, and I was just absolutely fascinated because these are my surroundings, and he was actually pulling no punches and describing, what it's like around here, and what he zeroes in on, is that this ecosystem. It's not only the government workers who do have caps on their salaries, but it are all the people who are feeding off this trough, and it's not just the CEOs, it's not just the executives at these defense contracting companies, but it is the lawyers who work for them. It's the lobbyists who fan out on the Hill to make sure that their weapon systems are funded every year. It's the consultants. It's the people who do the war gamings. It's the think tanks that are getting the money to produce the reports that justify action, that justify new systems, that justify more funding. And it goes on and on and on. And then, you have people in technology. Cybersecurity is huge here now. So you have entire neighborhoods springing up. Like I brought up Merrifield, which is a part of Fairfax County out here. This was a enormous strip mall type existence up until a few years from now. Now it's this it's this village development wwhere you have these high-end restaurants and
very
condos.
fancy. I was there. It's very fancy.
Yeah, and the rents are over $2,000 for a one bedroom, and who are living in these condos? But these kids who are being hired at these tech firms to do cybersecurity and intelligence, and so it's created an entire community of people who are all working together to maintain this status quo, and in what he calls the imperial city. So it isn't just about the government here. We're talking about way beyond, and he goes way off into Loudoun County, where we're talking about moguls. We're talking about people who are building not just McMansions, but actual mansions out in formerly wooded country. Virginia hunt country is now turned into this sort of playland for Washington's the power elite.
Obviously, there's gross distortion in the distribution of income, which is not a natural conclusion from a free market. So this is artificial. There's not a shortage of money. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of spending by government, and yet we have all these distortions and a lot of anger and a populist movement that we haven't had in a decade. But I believe near where you live, I think it's Loudoun County is the richest county. Is that correct? In the whole country. And the other number that I was fascinated with was how much money went into Virginia by this distribution. $95 billion has gone into this city, and then the poor aren't benefiting, even not too far. Some parts of Virginia, there's still poor people, and certainly in this country. And this is such a predictable result when government gets so involved. But aren't these the numbers to me are just astounding that have gravitated into Washington, in the Washington area in Northern Virginia?
Oh, absolutely. One article that I had read on this very subject had talked about the enormous growth in the town of Great Falls, which is right outside the Beltway, and it formerly a wooded hamlet, bedroom community of Washington with scattered modest homes. And now it is, if you Google real estate Great Falls, Virginia, you will find nothing under $1.2 million there for home prices. And the article went into not only the real estate, but the lifestyle of the people that live there. They're all high-powered lawyers, who have this sort of, they're living this sort of dream where they're driving around these expensive cars and networking and talking, they're all foodies, and it's really sort of despicable when you're thinking about the income equality in this area, because while you have the highest incomes and wealth in the country, the counties here are the wealthiest in the country, you also have the biggest income inequality gap, because you have to consider all of the people who grew up here that are not transplants, they didn't come here to work, minorities in the Washington, D.C. proper, whose wages have either stagnated or gone down since the recession, and all of the white-collar workers whose jobs didn't survive the recession, because there are plenty of professions that, it was like Darwinism here, and that, these people have gone, 5-10 years without work. You consider that their wages and their income has gone down. So you see this stark relief in the income inequality here that you might not see in other places. And so when you see these real estate prices and the luxury lifestyle in places like Great Falls or Loudoun County and McLean, Virginia, or Potomac, Maryland, they have the Wives of the Potomac is one of the housewives stories here, reality TV. And you look at that, and then you look at, some of what's been going on in D.C., where you have real existing poverty and a crime rate that's rising, and you think, wow, this is the capital. This is the capital of the United States.
Right.
Kelly, I'd like to think that we would miraculously win the moral argument against war, or even the practical argument against war that doesn't make us any safer. But I fear, unfortunately, even though I'll accept it, that the argument, we may win it in a way that is convincing the American people that they are being ripped off. And, Mike writes about this, too, about how rich and greedy Washington is so disdainful of what they call flyover country, i.e. the rest of us who pay the bill for their lavish lifestyle. And as much as I don't like the idea of class warfare, this really, I don't think, qualifies as class warfare, because the people in Washington are lying to the rest of the country about the real nature of the threat of terrorism and Russia and foreign countries. They're lying because it pads their bank accounts. And I think that's probably, the way that we might convince more people you're being ripped off. But Mike also talks about, and you write about this, that it's not just about the money. It's also about the ideology. And I think we should probably deal a little bit with that as well.
Yeah. And this is where I think Mike really, he kind of blows things out of the water here, because he talks about Mark Leibovich's book, Our Town, which was a powerful sort of examination of the Washington elite that came out a couple of years ago, and it talked about this sort of this pedestal that the Washington power brokers live on, and how they can't see so far down to the rest of us because they're too busy at their cocktail parties and networking in the green rooms and making their deals and being in front of a camera, and we know all about that, and it makes us sick, most of us who live outside the bubble. But what Mike talks about is what the ideology behind that, and what he talks about is this deep state in which you have everybody working to justify the status quo, to sustain the level of comfort that they live in, to sustain the level of incomes that are coming, either directly or indirectly from the government. So you have people who might be working for a defense contractor who are justifying their job when they wake up every day, which is basically more money for more war. You have people on the Hill that are justifying these budgets that will put the money into the hands of these defense contractors. You have the lobbyists who are out there, promoting it. You have the think tankers who are also promoting it. You have, and then you have the political campaigns, which, basically these members of Congress, they need to stay here. This is their new goal. It's not about, so much as, protecting the interests of their districts, but keeping themselves in this style that they've come accustomed to in Washington. So they're working. So it is a pro-establishment. It's a pro-government, pro-state, pro-empire ideology, all working together in sort of in a machine, and that's behind this power elite, this deep state, and it affects economic policy. It affects national security policy and domestic policy. And what he's saying is that everyone outside of this bubble can really is not empowered to do anything about it, because the rules are being written here in Washington. They're dictating what's going on outside of Washington, and the people dictating those rules are, the grain of their existence is behind keeping everything in place. And I think that's a really powerful argument that Mike Lofgren is making.
Okay, Kelly, I want to thank you very much. Our time has run out, but we deeply appreciate you coming on. And I hope our listeners now will follow more of what you do and what you write, because it's fascinating. You're a great reporter and a great writer. But thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
Good. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in today, and remind you that stories like this are so important to be kept up with current events. This, to me, was particularly interesting because there's a lot of ramification here. We're talking about the military-industrial complex and how massive it is and why the spending is bad and what do we do about it. Some people think that all we have to do is control the political spending, another rule on political spending. And I've never had much confidence in that because I sort of don't like regulating lobbyists. I think we need to regulate government. I think as long as government is there and they're massive and they have all these special interests, there's always going to be people who are going to try to take advantage of it. You know, the truth is, though, that if you had more people in Congress who were more principled, believe me, the lobbyists wouldn't bother them. It happened, and Daniel, I think, can verify this. We didn't have lobbyists come into our office. They knew where I stood, and they didn't bother. So I think there is things that we could do right now, but ultimately, you're always going to have this problem as the bigger the government. And the government is big and they spend too much because this also involves inflation. They print the money. Where does the money go? It goes to the rich. And they build up massive inflationary problems like very expensive houses and very expensive yachts and airplanes and all these sorts of things at the expense of the middle class. And this is a characteristic of Austrian economics. They teach that the middle class eventually gets wiped out. But everybody's talking today in the presidential campaign about how tragic it is for the middle class, but they don't talk about monetary policy and the Federal Reserve and the wiping out of the middle class and the destruction of money and why spending is bad. They all want to spend more. Can you believe it? They all want to rebuild the military. I mean, what are they talking about? How can they need to rebuild the military when it's bigger than everybody else put together? But nevertheless, I think stories like this help point out how serious this problem is when you can see, in particular, all the money flowing into Northern Virginia that has the richest counties in the country, $295 billion into Virginia for special interests to support the military-industrial complex. So it's a great story and something that we will keep up with. And I want to thank everybody today for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube, RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Check them out. Subscribe. Ron Paul's son actually had a bipartisan effort going to limit arm transfers to Saudi. This out of the libertarianrepublic.com. Says here, Senator Rand Paul and Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, have introduced a bipartisan bill that would limit the transfer of arms to Saudi Arabia. The bill would add additional steps to the existing notification process, which the president must go through in order to facilitate armed transfers to Saudi Arabia. The president has to certify that Saudi Arabia is acting to protect civilians from its military actions. The president must also certify that Saudi Arabia isn't giving funding, material support, or lethal aid to terrorist organizations. Great. Okay. And it says, sorry, I'm having a couple of issues here. Okay. And the Saudis are taking necessary measures to target designated terrorist organizations. Paul said in a press release, quote, "For too long, the Obama administration has not been holding countries receiving U.S. military munitions accountable in the Middle East. It is no secret that Saudi Arabia's record on strictly targeting combatants and legitimate military targets in Yemen has been questionable. I believe, along with Senator Murphy, that the U.S. should halt the sale of air-to-ground munitions to Saudi Arabia until Congress has conducted proper oversight and ensured that such munitions are being used in a way that is consistent with our country's national security strategy and values. The bill itself isn't revolutionary in its content, but as Robert Naiman points out in the Huffington Post, what's revolutionary is that Murphy and Paul are formally challenging the taboo against publicly asking questions about the U.S. military relationship to Saudi Arabia and inviting other senators to join them. The bill comes as a group of senators are poised to pass legislation that would limit the Saudi government's immunity from lawsuits over the 9/11 attacks. The Obama administration has been lobbying against it, citing that it would create a dangerous precedent and open the United States to being sued by individuals in other countries. Saudi Arabia has threatened to sell $750 billion in U.S. assets if the bill passes. Again, that was a Libertarian Republic. Go check them out. And, you know, I covered this last broadcast quite a bit. And, you know, one thing I forgot to mention is the whole thing has been brewing over there for a while, that things like ISIS and all that has been able to pop up. And when we do have a threat, we don't put proper support behind it. We have a government that's funding people like Saudi Arabia. We have Saudi Arabia threatening to sell off their assets. And we have ultra wealthy people basically trying to hold on to their power. They're part of the secret government. They're not all of it, but they are the beneficiaries from it. I do want to get in this short clip, this one from AMTV, Asset Allocation, How to Get and Stay Wealthy. Because a lot of people don't really understand all of this. But let me go ahead and get into this. Okay, I guess it's not going to play. Okay, that was a short clip, but you could go check it out. But if I can get this other one that I've had sitting here to pop up. Yep. Okay, it's actually going to play. I had two of them, and one's frozen up. This one's going to play, though. So, this from AMTV. George Soros exposes real culprit behind democracy spring. And, we know that George Soros or groups that he might be connected with have been behind a lot of these government protests in multiple countries, maybe. We've seen people with organizations linked to George Soros in Ukraine, and Egypt and Occupy Wall Street. But Christopher Green kind of breaks this down a little bit more. So we'll go ahead and get this clip here.
Visit our sponsor, American Survival Wholesale, right now. Affordable, long-term, storable food. Christian, veteran-owned and operated. American Survival Wholesale provides food storage and survival products for you and your family. Get custom food packs, 3, 6, and 12 months. Pay-as-you-go food packs, survival products, organic foods, and a 15-minute consult free of charge. Food packs as low as 50 cents per serving, gluten and GMO-free, based on a 2,000 calorie per day diet. Part of all sales proceeds go to support our veterans, the Veteran Outreach Program and Bible Drive for those in need. Call American Survival Wholesale today at 818-720-0759. That's 818-720-0759. Because the world isn't getting any safer. That's American Survival Wholesale. Worship, restoration, revival. Call now or click the link below. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. It is April 13th, 2016. Many of you are probably aware because you watched the video. I was interviewed on RT International live yesterday, thanks to one of our subscribers, Brian, who luckily screen captured the video on a cell phone. We were able to re-air it. Democracy Spring is an anti-Donald Trump radical organization. And what I mean by that, we have to deconstruct again who's behind this radical Democracy Spring movement. You just have to do a basic internet search to know that George Soros, the billionaire, funds groups like MoveOn.org, also organizations like the Institute for Policy Studies and Demos that fund these radical events in Washington, D.C. And I woke up this morning, got another email from another subscriber. Thank you very much. Name is escaping me at the moment. Said that there was also a transcript of the interview and the report on the front page of RT.com. So go check it out right now. Please share it, read the article, comment, share it on Facebook, Twitter, get it out. I don't think RT liked what I had to say, so please, all of you tuning in, listening, go and see and find that clip. Again, I was on at 1 p.m. Arizona time, Pacific time, live on RT International. Go to their website. They've got a live stream. Try to dig it up. I've got my post-producer looking for it as well. If you can, send it my way. Put it in the comment box or send me an email to info@amtvmedia.com. You know, it's really exciting to see the message of truth reach the mainstream. And I've got to give RT a lot of credit for posting this article. I wasn't sure that they would. You know, basically shedding light on the truth that the real culprit behind, quote unquote, Democracy Spring is billionaires like George Soros. These evil men, these social engineers that are helping to infiltrate our government, radicalize our government. And this is exactly what's happening. This is exactly who these people are on the ground. I'm not saying there's not organic, good-hearted elements, a part of all this anger, etc. But make no mistake about it, this is funded by billionaires. And isn't that ironic? Is there not irony in that the message of the Democracy Spring protesters is to remove big money, billionaires out of politics, yet they're being funded by a billionaire who's helping to radicalize Americans on the ground? I mean, we've seen the same thing. I talked about this extensively over in Europe with the immigration crisis. This is all admitted by George Soros. They want to destroy our borders. They want to destroy the borders in Europe, so that there's an infiltration through the migration crisis that overthrows these respective sovereign nations and integrates this new world order paradigm. This is what it's all about.
What sort of a financial deal should Obama be seeking to strike when he travels to China next month?
No, I think this would be the time because you really need to bring China into the creation of a new world order, financial world order. They are kind of reluctant members of the IMF. They play along, but they don't make much of a contribution because it's not their institution. Their share is not commensurate. Their voting rights are not commensurate to their weight. So I think you need a new world order that China has to be part of the process of creating it, and they have to buy in. They have to own it the same way as, let's say, the United States.
So again, kudos to RT. And remember, all forms of media are propaganda. So at times I'll criticize RT, just like I'll criticize Donald Trump, even though I support him. You know, that's what I think the real media is about. That's what I think alternative media is about, is that everybody is fair game. So again, I got to give kudos to RT for posting the content, getting it out there. It was kind of interesting. I got a call yesterday from Russia, which I don't usually get a call from Russia, and just happened to pick up the phone and they put me on the air. So thank you. And thank you to our audience for all your tremendous support, for unearthing the video, for supporting what we do and helping bring the message to the mainstream. Also, I was watching Donald Trump at a town hall with Mr. Anderson Cooper last night, followed by Don Lemon, talking to Donald Trump and his family. The Trumpster, very angry, of course, at what happened in Colorado, even though it's entirely legal. Cruz stealing all the delegates, there not being a primary or a caucus vote at all. Talking about that, talking about how the system is rigged, how it's really criminal. It's far worse than the corporate shenanigans he's been involved with or the corporate insiders he deals with on a daily basis. Talks about how politicians are far more dishonest than a lot of the corporate tycoons that he works with or customers on a regular basis.
You have been very critical, though, of what happened in Colorado. And I want to read out some of the things you have said. You said the nominating system in Colorado was, quote, rigged, disgusting, and dirty. You called it a corrupt deal full of crooked shenanigans. Ted Cruz is saying you're just being a whiner. I mean, the bottom line is the rules are the rules. Didn't you just get outplayed on the ground?
No, I don't think so. Look, first of all, I watched Ted Cruz, and I watched him very strongly say, well, he's been winning, but, I've won 22 states and he's won 10, and we're really way up on votes, in terms of the voters, which to me is very important, but it's never talked. I'm millions of votes ahead of him, and as you know, I'm hundreds of delegates ahead of him. But the Colorado thing was very, very unfair, and I thought Louisiana was very unfair. I won Louisiana. I won it easily.
So I won the popular vote.
I won the popular vote, and because of all the shenanigans that goes on. And this
but you call them shenanigans. Those are the rules, and didn't you know those?
You know why the rules? I know the rules very well, but I know that it's stacked against me and by the establishment. I fully understand it. We had people out there, and they weren't heard. And then, in fact, today, when it was announced, the numbers were announced, they put out something on Twitter saying, oh, we stopped Trump. Essentially, we stopped Trump. That was put out by the party in Colorado. The point is, it was stacked against us.
And also his family there, which I think is really telling, and I thought was a little bit of a puff piece, but we had people like Ivanka Trump, his daughter, his son, the rest of his family, I thought spoke very eloquently, and is really a testament. Anybody that criticizes Donald Trump and says that he's a misogynist, woman-hating pig is honestly a retard. You have no idea what you're talking about. And the proof in the pudding of that is look at Ivanka. Look at his other daughter. Well-spoken, beautiful, successful, powerful.
Well, I think it's such a personal decision that ultimately it was one he had to arrive to on his own. And obviously, as we've all seen over the last several months, it's a vicious industry, politics, much more so than real estate or anything we've ever experienced. So, but we were just incredibly excited for him. I mean, we know what he's capable of. We've stood by his side for the last decade in my case, a little bit longer in Don's case, and watched him do these deals at the Trump Organization. And we know what he could bring to the country. So we're just happy to support him.
I mean, if that isn't equality, I don't know what is. So I thought really telling, proof is in the pudding last night, but also quite suspicious. It was one of the more fair, balanced pieces I've ever seen CNN put out on Donald Trump. And honestly, we got to question it. We've got to be highly suspicious of why they would put Donald Trump on national television with Mr. Anderson Cooper, followed by Don Lemon, both homosexuals, nothing against that, but just that's a fact. Both homosexuals representing CNN, their main figures, part of that mainstream media organization, really doing a puff piece for Donald Trump. Why would they do that? Now, let's just think critically. Maybe they know, based on polling, let's say the global elites that, by the way, that own the media, which we know all to be truthful, just like George Soros is sponsoring these radical protests and destabilizing Europe and the United States, et cetera. What if the global elites know that Donald Trump doesn't have a chance against Hillary Clinton in 2016? Again, the table's already been turned. It's already been decided. The election is rigged. I mean, even Donald Trump is talking about this. The fix is in. Would they not then promote Donald Trump and put him on the grand stage? Let's say they know that Ted Cruz has a better chance when positioned head-to-head, which some of the polls have actually suggested with Hillary Clinton. Well, you would do exactly what we saw last night. You do a puff piece for Donald Trump, you'd build him up, you'd give a balanced report, something I never see CNN do, especially when it comes to race issues, it comes to LGBT issues, and it comes to, a lot of these divide and conquer strategies used by the global elites through the mouthpiece and spokes model, teleprompter reader that makes up the divide and conquer strategist Barack Hussein in the membrane Obama. So highly suspicious of what I saw last night. I thought it was a puff piece for Donald Trump, worked for and towards his campaign's advantage, but very strange and peculiar that CNN would frame it in that light, because they never do. So there's got to be something behind it, and we've got to be cynical, and we have to be critical thinkers. Again, as I talked about yesterday, it's just a simple internet search to find out that George Soros, who funds organizations like MoveOn.org, had been planning, and this has been in the works, I've talked about it for months now, this civil unrest that we have in Washington, D.C. today to destabilize and create this social chaos through the quote-unquote social engineering. I mean, this is what George Soros does.
But I am an enthusiastic supporter of this idea, because the European Union is in an existential crisis, and it needs to get out of that because of the migration problem is effectively distressing, and the European Union is falling apart.
Just 2 weeks ago, you said that actually we should be much more careful because there's a risk of repeating what happened in 2008.
Yeah. Well, 2008, we are repeating it. It was a time of a financial crisis and a bear market. And you have the same condition today. But the source of the disequilibrium is different. In 2008, the root cause was the subprime crisis in America. Now the root cause is basically China.
This is what these people do. This is the agenda of the global elites. Global integration, the destruction of our borders, engineered social chaos. I mean, this is what propaganda is. This is what social engineering is. This is what mind control is, the brainwashing of the peasants on the ground. It's exactly what it is. And again, I'm not taking anything away from the real organic qualities here, the anger on the streets, that we should be shining a giant spotlight on the real criminals like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, etc. I mentioned this in the interview yesterday, but we have to understand who's behind all of this. How has this come to be? Who's funding it? Again, your mom probably told you growing up, follow the money, or your father. Always follow the money. It'll show you and tell you the truth.
I start from the supposition that the world is topsy-turvy, that things are all wrong, that the wrong people are in jail and the wrong people are out of jail, that the wrong people are in power and the wrong people are out of power, that the wealth is distributed in this country and the world in such a way as not simply to require small reform, but to require a drastic reallocation of wealth. I start from the supposition that we don't have to say too much about this, because all we have to do is think about the state of the world today and realize that things are all upside down. Now, if you don't think, if you just listen to TV and read scholarly things, you actually begin to think that things are not so bad, or that just little things are wrong. But you have to get a little detached and then come back and look at the world, and you are horrified.
I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below. And don't forget to share the article and the video posted yesterday, the interview on RT International. Get it out everywhere. Make sure they have us on again. Thank you for your support. Peace.
Christopher Green, AMTV on YouTube. Subscribe, check them out. Okay, maybe. Here we go. This from the antimedia.org. Did Bernie Sanders just go full establishment? Now, we know I'm not a Bernie Sanders supporter. We also know I'm not a Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Hillary Clinton supporter. This out of anti-media about did Bernie Sanders just go full establishment? Comments made by Bernie Sanders this week may just have blindsided and disillusioned swaths of his support base. Some of those with higher expectations of the peacenik candidate breathed a collective sigh of disappointment after he endorsed Obama's extrajudicial drone assassination program. At the same time, the Democratic candidate backed the recent deployment of 250 U.S. troops to further death and destruction in Syria. During the town hall meeting at Philadelphia's National Constitution Center, he told MSNBC's Chris Hayes that the people of the United States have a right to defend themselves. The warmongering endorsement, which could have easily slid under the radar, has slotted into a much wider discussion that included vote winners like Planned Parenthood, violence against women, marijuana, and gun control. Despite acknowledging he would do everything to avoid perpetual war in the Middle East, when asked if he would he keep the government's secret kill list if he were to become president, the progressive candidate was unhesitant to look, terrorism is a very serious issue. There are people out there who want to kill Americans, who want to attack this country, and I think we have a lot of right to defend ourselves, he said. Asked if he thinks the current method in which the White House decides which suspected terrorists are added to the kill list is constitutional and legal, he added, in general, I do, yes. While some Bernie supporters came to the slow and painful realization that there are no saviors, others took to Twitter and accused him of being a quasi-socialist warmonger and brutal imperialist. It appears that soon the only ones feeling the burn will be the families killed by the drone program that he fully supports. So go check that out, antimedia.com. Definitely an interesting article. Did Bernie Sanders just go full establishment? There's no such thing as not. You know, I even look at Rand Paul as someone that was establishment to a point. He was willing to go along with a lot of stuff, to thinking that he would get some leeway on things he wanted. But I think he's realizing, no, that's not going to happen. They're going to let you help them, and then they're not going to be there to help you, because what you're trying to do is reduce their power. And they're going the opposite way. So when you help them, even gets further away from your goals. I think Ron Paul knew that, and that's why he played the game the way he did. He wasn't willing to vote for these bills, even when, you know, he put things into the bills that basically sent some of the taxpayer money back to his district. And people criticized him for that. Well, listen, you know, every senator that's voting for this thing, and most of them that don't, write something into it so that something gets done in their district. That's a known fact. If you know anything about how Congress works. So, of course, he would go ahead and write his little additive, basically something for relief or something for floods or whatever. He would go ahead and do that. And he would still vote no. He refused to vote yes for things he did not agree on. And I still didn't like the whole, let's write something in, but I understood it. Difference. We look at what we have now, and too many people play the game. And he refused to do that, and that's what we're missing. And I think eventually Rand Paul's going to realize that, but I don't think he's completely there yet. But I think him dropping out of the primaries as early as he did might have been because he was having a realization of what. It's hard telling. I can't read his mind. I do kind of want to move on here, though. This was out of Zero Hedge. America's millennial dream, making 20% less and drowning in debt. This is something I've kind of covered, and it doesn't really help our situation here out. Millennials have now overtaken baby boomers as America's largest living generation, according to Pew Research. Millennials are, as defined by Pew, as ages 18 to 34, now number 75.4 million, slightly edging out of baby boomers 51 to 69. Now, I have a problem with these numbers because I'm right there on the very end of millennials. I barely missed Generation X according to the numbers, but I grew up Generation X. That's before they came up with millennials, and we were still Generation X. I grew up in the, late 80s and early 90s and late 90s and into the very, very beginning of 2000. I was at the end of Generation X growing up, and, from the mid 80s to, the mid 90s was kind of the dying off of Generation X. You could see the changes getting ready to come. My senior year of high school, that freshman class, you seen a completely different, group of kids coming into the school that it wasn't, the gradual move that you seen throughout the years. It was like, whoa, what's going on here? And I don't like when I get grouped in with millennials because I'm definitely a Generation X, so I don't like these artificial numbers. I think when you're right there on the edge, you group in with a certain group, and mine was definitely Generation X. But onto this article here. It says here, millennials also have a few other things going for them, however, not in a good way. As the Wall Street as the Wall Street Journal reports, millennials in New York City are earning about 20% less than the previous generation of workers, and they are absolutely drowning in $14 billion in debt. The average worker, 23 years old, in New York City, earned $23,543 compared to 27,731 in 2000. For inflation, moving up the age scale a bit, the average 29-year-old made 50,331 in 2014 versus 56,026 in 2000. Losing ground, today's millennial New Yorkers are making quite the money, aren't making quite the money with the most immediate previous generation of young workers. Another point worth mentioning in the article is that nationwide, the percentage of millennials living independently has fallen from 51% in 2000 to just 45% in 2014. In summary, people from age 18 to 34 are going to college, getting into debt, entering into the workforce at minimum wage, and living with their parents. The very definition of the American dream, isn't it? Imagine if Obama hadn't saved the world's economy as he humbly said he did. Of course, all this speaks to what we discussed repeatedly on Zero Hedge. The economy is weak. The only jobs being created are primarily waiter and bartender jobs, and the Fed is fueling an enormous student loan credit bubble. Now, courtesy of years of mismanaged policies and incompetence, millennials do face the consequences directly. And remember, the title of this article here is America's Millennial Dream, making 20% less and drowning in debt. Give me a second here. When we look at a lot of the millennials and we see they go to college, all of them tend to go to college. And it's not hard for someone with a GED to get in college at all. We're seeing that a lot more. And they're coming out without really any work experience. Why? Well, since the economy's really gotten bad, definitely the latest probably 5, 6, 7 years, these generations coming out, we have none of them with jobs in high school. We have high schools now letting out later. They're letting the elementary and middle school students, or sometimes just the elementary school students, out at like 2 o'clock. And they have to go to school real early. But then the high school kids, they're not letting them out till 4:35. Therefore, a lot of the jobs might not want them real late at night either, because that kind of puts them in a spot. Plus, how late they can work depends on what state and city you're into. Some cities, they don't let the kids work late because even if they have a job, they have basically a curfew. Some cities I know have ordinances where, well, there's a curfew unless you're coming and going from work, which still a lot of those companies still rather try to get them out close to that curfew date. We treat them more like children. No jobs for them because most of those jobs are taken by adults that can't find good work here in America right now. what we are having are kids that go to college thinking, well, I go to college. My older brothers went to college, got a good job. My parents went to college. They got a real good job. Kind of maybe sometimes not seeing or forgetting or being too young to remember maybe, yeah, they made real good money for a while, and then they kind of, the economy hit a real bad spot, and maybe you weren't getting all the new things you were getting. You slowed down on it. You know, you don't realize that most people got a new phone almost every year or every 2 years. Now you see a lot of people 3, 4 years before they get a new phone. Or they buy used phones. They're not getting the up-to-date phone. Not everybody has, you know, the up-to-date phone. And some of them do because they're living at home with mommy and daddy. So what money do they make, they might waste on that. But they might have been naive to the fact that their parents, yeah, even though they went to college, they made good money. When the economy went bad, they weren't making quite as much, or some of them had to find a new job. But they go, well, yeah, they got a college degree and they still found a good job. Well, their work history has something to do with that too. I know my mom, she has worked since she was in high school. Even changing jobs, she usually never went more than a week. At the, maybe 2 weeks until 2008. And she went for almost a year until she found a job. They're coming out of college with no work experience. Student loans, because that's what they tell you to do. That's not just, well, let me try to work and pay for each semester. Well, no, the prices are too high. You couldn't work and go to school and pay for that. You could work full time, but then you couldn't go to school for full time, which defeats the purpose of you working full time to pay for the college that you can't go to, let alone study and do your homework. And being someone that has seen a lot of what's coming out, they have probably all-nighters doing a lot of their work, because everything seems to be a project now. It was pretty amazing watching friends and people I've dated, project this, project that, and it's just, and what even amazed me is the amount of things people had to buy to do a project required for class that would take them all night to do, spend money, and usually came out of part of their loan, student loan. But they come out and then no work experience, and well, everybody has a degree now, and you go to a job where, well, there's people that have been in the work field. They might not even have a degree, but you're working for them. Why? Because they've been in the field. They've been doing it for, a couple decades, and they know what they're doing. And they get paid good money because they know their job. They know their, what needs to be done. And these younger people, they kind of act as you owe them something because they have a degree and you don't, or, I've seen them treat these people that have worked for these companies for 20 years when something messes up, they know exactly what it is, how to fix it, and they can get it going quicker than anybody in the building. But the younger ones come in and go, I have a degree, I should be making more than that person. And it really amazes me. And I don't want to knock college, because college has helped a lot of people in the past. Of course, there are certain things that the propaganda and brainwashing in a lot of colleges, and it's gotten worse, but there's been a little bit of it for as long as institutions have existed. But for the most part, it produced a lot of knowledge for people to be able to prosper. But it doesn't seem to be doing that anymore. And you got all these people in debt. And of course, now that kind of fuels people like Bernie Sanders. Everybody's in debt, no good job. Working for people that aren't in debt because they didn't go to college, and now you want someone to pay for your college. If this wasn't worth anything, and we're told that this is what we're supposed to do, then you pay for it. And, I just hope that we can see institutions pop up that will actually be able to do things to help get I don't know how to word this. To help society follow a path that will lead to freedom and success, and that's understanding what real capitalism is. You can look at anarcho-capitalism, you can look at Austrian economics, the monetary policy, real issues, look into conspiracy, and leave it open for people to find what they truly believe based on what facts and what things that may not always be 100% connected, but are pretty, well, if this, and this, and this, and this happen, I don't think it's a coincidence. I can't link them to, prove it 100%, but I can at least take a critical thought about this and, hold skepticism towards something. Okay, give me a quick second here. I think this is going to work here. I want to play a short clip. This is from Reason TV, but this is Christian Tate, which many of you might know from Ben Swan and then Truth in Media. This is titled The Libertarian Chick on Government Gone Wild. Basically a libertarian manifesto from Christian Tate. So I kind of wanted to play this and kind of talk about a couple things here.
sounds nice to say things like, oh, I want to help the poor, everyone deserves free college, everyone deserves free healthcare. But in reality, getting people hooked on the government and not giving them pathways to become self-sufficient obviously is not compassionate.
Hi, I'm Nick Gillespie with Reason TV, and today we're talking with Kristen Tate. She blogs at thelibertarianchick.com, and she's the author of the great new book, Government Gone Wild, How DC Politicians Are Taking You for a Ride and What You Can Do About It. So this is a libertarian manifesto aimed at millennials especially. How do you summarize your core message?
My project with this book was to reach an audience that would not necessarily already be politically involved, not even just involved with libertarianism, but politics. As a millennial myself, I regularly notice this general apathy within my generation. And it's not that my generation is stupid. We're just depressed with the state of affairs when it comes to politics.
What's so depressing? Look, I'm a baby boomer and I'm depressed by politics. What's depressing you guys?
Well, every time you see anything in the news about politics, it's all just negative, negative, negative. Oh, we're $19 trillion in debt. The job market sucks. A lot of us are living in our parents' basements. It's just honestly easier to tune out, go on Snapchat, and stalk your ex-boyfriends on Facebook than it is to try to engage in these issues in a way that's fun and, frankly, uplifting.
Throughout the book, there's an optimism and an upbeat energy, which is great. But then it's also specific. I mean, you're saying, part of the problem is that the government, or Republicans or Democrats, they're always trying to control people. They're always trying to limit your choices or tell you, do this, don't do that. How does that factor into a kind of millennial malaise about politics?
We like freedom. I mean, that kind of comes with the whole internet age. We like having a lot of control over our lives. So this big brother idea of the government always watching us, trying to control every aspect of our lives is a big turnoff. And frankly, again, I think it's depressing, and it's not a message that resonates with millennials. So again, I think that it's easier to just throw your hands up and just say, I'm not going to engage in this at all, than it is to try to sort through these issues in a way that is conducive to progress.
What's your libertarian origin story?
Well, my dad's more of a Republican and my mom's a Democrat, so they're divorced, obviously.
Yeah.
But I kind of grew up disagreeing with both of them on a lot of issues and not really knowing where I stood politically. And then as I became older and I sort of got myself into the world outside of my house, I started noticing among my peers a very, very dominant shift towards the left, especially in college, because you have all of these professors who are, in my classes, they were kind of like brainwashing the kids, even in these political science classes. So that really disturbed me. So at first I kind of thought, maybe I'm a Republican, and I started going to these Republican student groups, and the second I got into these groups, I thought, okay, I'm definitely not a Republican, because they were talking about policing the world and bombing places, and all this fear-mongering was going around. And that's kind of when I discovered libertarianism. I think I heard Ron Paul speak at some sort of student speech I think he was giving at the University of New Hampshire, and I just thought, this guy makes a lot of sense.
Here, let me ask you a specific question about Ron Paul, who, more than anybody probably in the past 10 years, really kind of put libertarianism on steroids. And surprisingly, he appeals to tons of college students and younger people, even though he is somewhere between 70 and 1,000 years old. And he doesn't play to the crowd. I mean, He speaks in long sentences, complicated thoughts. What is the appeal of Ron Paul, do you think? Or what was it for you and to millennials in general?
The guy is just so damn authentic, and it's so nice and a breath of fresh air to have someone like that in politics, because we as a generation, I think, and not just millennials, everyone is sick of these canned politicians giving written out speeches, and it's just so unauthentic. So when someone like Ron Paul came along, he's goofy, he's kind of, he makes mistakes in his speeches, he laughs at himself. That was very, very inspiring for a lot of young people.
So that's kind of the style, but then the substance also resonates.
Absolutely. Absolutely, of course, because when you look at a lot of polls, which Reason it's always writing about this. Millennials as a generation, even though they may not know they're libertarians, they tend to be very more accepting with different social lifestyles and then fiscally conservative. So that really is libertarianism. So yes, Ron Paul's message resonated with a lot of people in my generation because of that.
In the book, especially in the final chapter or so, you talk a lot about compassion in the book and about how compassion and politics should go hand in hand in a particular way. What's, compassion and libertarianism rarely, get talked about in the same breath. So what's the role of compassion in your form of libertarianism?
Well, compassion literally means to suffer through something with somebody. And this idea that giving people handouts from the government is compassionate is just totally ludicrous. And it's something that I think libertarians and also some conservatives really need to shine a spotlight on. Even with Bernie Sanders, we're seeing this movement among young people getting behind this man because they think he's so compassionate. Because it sounds nice to say things like, oh, I want to help the poor, everyone deserves free college, everyone deserves free healthcare. But in reality, getting people hooked on the government and not giving them pathways to become self-sufficient obviously is not compassionate. We are literally creating generations of people who are dependent on the federal government to get by. We have over 50% of Americans relying on checks from the Fed every month. So this is not compassion. We need to shine a spotlight on this issue because I think it's a winning issue for libertarians. Like you said, not many people mix those two words, libertarianism and compassion, but I think this ought to be focused on more because I think it's a winning issue for libertarians. It's just a matter of getting that message out there in a way that is uplifting and kind of makes sense to people. Is there anybody in the major parties that you're hoping will become president? No. Honestly, this election makes me want to projectile vomit. It's a fascinating election, actually, but there's really nobody out there that I really love running. Everyone has their issues in my eyes. I think Hillary and Bernie are obviously the two worst choices in my opinion, but I really don't see any very liberty-friendly candidates in the two parties right now. On that uplifting note, We'll leave it there. We've been talking with Kristen Tate. She blogs at thelibertarianchick.com, and she's the author of the excellent new book, Government Gone Wild, How D.C. Politicians Are Taking You for a Ride, and What You Can Do About It. Kristen, thanks for talking. Thank you, Nick. For Reason TV, I'm Nick Gillespie.
Go to YouTube, go to Reason TV, check them out, subscribe. And again, that was Kristen Tate. The Libertarian Chick. Now, we're talking about the millennials and stuff. I think that people right now in this election, Bernie and Donald, are playing off of things they learned from Ron Paul. Things that were authentic about Ron Paul that they kind of play off of. Donald Trump Donald Trump is not a dumb person. I think he says and does a lot of what he does just to make it sound like he's more like the everyday person. Bernie Sanders does the same. Bernie Sanders has been in Washington, D.C. long enough, believe me. He knows how to talk. We see people looking at these candidates as authentic. They look at Ted Cruz, Hillary Clinton as establishment. And I think that the ones that are truly kind of waking up are the ones that are looking third party. And we know by looking at numbers that more and more people are slowly going, maybe Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, those people aren't really, they don't love freedom, even though they may be authentic or they may not be authentic. And I think that's why we see so many candidates in the fight within the Libertarian Party for a nominee. Because we are getting to the point where third party might become a viable option. But as that happens, we are going to see more imposters. And we may already be seeing multiple imposters. And we really won't know unless one of them actually wins. So that's one of the problems with that whole issue. Okay, let's see if I can not crash my computer all of a sudden. Yeah, this don't look good. Okay, give me a second here. I'm having quite a bit of issues. Okay, I might have it now. Maybe. No, we're just going to have to completely close this. Sorry about this, guys. Every once in a while, my browser wants to max out. Okay. Okay, here we go. This one kind of got me. And this is another example of government overreach into people's rights and their ability to acknowledge things going on and have control. Now, we've talked about, the ability to buy raw milk. You can still consume it, but to buy it. Now, marijuana for medical uses, even recreational use, but I really like to focus on the medical uses because I think that there are many, and then you get in industrial, and then the whole fact of the freedom of someone to choose. This article out of the Natural News, it just upset me. Give me a second here. Okay. Naturalnews.com, chemo child abuse. Connecticut forced a 17-year-old girl to have chemotherapy without her consent. Now her cancer is back. Cassandra Callender of Windsor Locks, Connecticut, was diagnosed with stage 3 or stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma when she was 17 years old. Shortly after the diagnosis in September 2014, she refused chemotherapy and decided to look into alternative treatments to protect her body from long-term effects such as organ damage and infertility. However, the state of Connecticut forced her into getting treatment against her own and her mother's will. Her doctor said she would likely die without chemotherapy and reported her case as child abuse to Connecticut Department of Child and Family, who took her case to state superior court after doctors stated that Cassandra needed the treatment, which has an 80 to 95% success rate. The court ruled that she was too young to decide about her own health and forced her into getting chemotherapy. At first, Cassandra and her mother complied with the decision and went through with the treatment after receiving 2 rounds of chemotherapy. However, Cassandra ran away from home, refusing any further treatment. Unfortunately, the court intervened again, and Cassandra was removed from her mother's home, allowing the DCF to take temporary custody and make all decisions regarding Cassandra's medical treatments. She was forcibly hospitalized and underwent a grueling 5 months of chemotherapy. How can a state force a 17-year-old to have chemotherapy? Cassandra fully understood that she was facing and what the consequences of her decision could have had on her life. Words cannot describe what my life has become over the last few months, she wrote in a column for the Current. Horrifying seems like an understatement. What I've been going through is traumatizing. Never did it cross my mind that one day I would be diagnosed with cancer. Whether I live 17 years or 100 years should not be anyone's choice but mine. How long is a person actually supposed to live, and why? Who determines that? I care about the quality of my life, not just the quantity. However, the court ruled that she was a minor, and the DCF stated that it was their duty to act since there was a chance she could die if the decision were left up to her and her mother. When experts such as the several physicians involved in the case tell us with certainty that a child will die as a result of leaving a decision up to a parent, then the department has a responsibility to take action, DCF said in a statement. Cancer has come back. After 5 months of forced chemotherapy, Cassandra went into remission. However, though the state forbade her to look into alternative treatments because the chemotherapy would give her an 85% chance of survival, her cancer has now come back. Here is my 85% chance of life after chemo, she wrote in a Facebook post. Unfortunately, I didn't make the 85%. I fell into the 15%. Cassandra, now 18, is legally old enough to take matters into her own hands and told the Associated Press that she is moving forward with alternative treatments. The DCF recently released a statement saying that it sympathizes with Cassandra and wishes the best for her and her family. From the beginning, the department has been guided by the medical experts' judgment about what would be in Cassandra's best interest. The statement said Cassandra's health and well-being remain in the forefront of our thoughts and our hopes for her full recovery. Cassandra has now set up a GoFundMe page to help accumulate the funds for alternative cancer treatments and in order to hire an attorney to fight her case. While Big Pharma wants us to believe that controversial cancer treatments are the only way to survive cancer, alternative treatments can be far more effective. If you want to learn more regarding the truth about cancer and how conventional cancer treatments can do more harm than good, watch the powerful, life-changing series, The Truth About Cancer, here. And there's a click there on naturalnews.com. Again, the title of that article is Chemo Child Abuse Connecticut Forced 17-year-old Girl to Have Chemotherapy Without Her Consent. Now her cancer is back. So go there and check that out. But with all the reports coming out about studies that looked at a lot of the documented cancer cases and chemotherapy cases, come out and say that, well, most chemotherapy never does work. And what it does to the human body, for so long, the, agencies or whatever would just puppet what the pharmaceutical companies put out. This sounds like the same stuff that had gone on for years with the taser company and tasers, and how, well, the police departments rely on the company's own research. And we need more independent research, which means that you have to take the regulations away that prevent people from looking into alternative treatments, because even alternative treatments in most places are very restricted. Even when you look at marijuana, from what I understand, when it comes to marijuana, they cannot write you a prescription for marijuana. They write you a referral, because if they prescribed it to you, they could lose their medical license. They would lose their medical license. They write referrals. So, there's been a lot of information about alternative treatments and, cannabis even being one. I think it was Charlotte's Web, was a strain created. It doesn't get you high. It was created and perfected for a little girl. And it was meant to have cannabinoids that weren't THC that would help fight cancer without getting you high. And they turn that into oil. So, it's kind of like industrial hemp, except it is in the marijuana family, just without barely any THC. Probably a little more than hemp, but not much. So it's not something, when you look at medical marijuana, it's not just an excuse for someone to get high. There's actual strains out there that are, brought down for certain types of what, people are researching and studying the effects that it's having with certain types of cannabinoids against cancer and other issues. People having seizures. Now, there might not be, 100% proof out there, but there's even Harvard coming out talking about it reducing lung cancer tumors. So we should keep open minds about this and, lift regulations on studying definitely natural things. But see, again, that's a control factor. They have to be able to control. They have to be able to make money off you. And it would be very hard to make much money off of you with marijuana unless it's highly restricted. But I think eventually it's going to get to a point where society won't allow for the highly restriction of something that could easily be grown anywhere. And I think you will see the ability for people to, look at these as options. And hopefully that comes because if you got cancer, you need that ability to seek what options you think are the best. Sorry, I'm having issues again. I'm just trying to work them out. Okay. Try and get this up. Come on. Sorry, guys. Should have it here in a minute. This was from Reason. Here we go, finally. Mom lets her 3 kids wait in car. FBI agent tells her she can't. And this is from the Hit and Run blog by Lenore Skenazy. My friend Julie Gunlock lives just outside of Washington, D.C. She's a great mom and the author of a book I love, From Cupcakes to Chemicals, How the Culture of Alarmism Makes Us Afraid of Everything and How to Fight Back. She recently found herself fighting back a particularly stubborn misconception. She let her kids aged 9, 11, and 5 wait in the car for about 15 minutes while she ran into a store to get dinner. She emerged to find an FBI agent flashing his badge and insisting, "Ma'am, we can't do that because kids get snatched all the time." Julie knew that was untrue. She told him to put away his badge and go find a real crook. Here's her feisty article, and here's her note to me. Dear Lenore, I thought you'd want to see this article I wrote for Heat Street. As you know, that this incident rattled me, and I am so thankful that I could contact you. Actually, I emailed you before even calling my husband for comfort, support, and accurate information about my rights and the laws currently on the books. I'm so grateful to you for creating a website where moms can go for solid information. And it goes on her little thing. But it says here, some people wonder why the topic of kids waiting in the car comes up so often in my writing. After all, I'm not like the kids are out playing or delivering newspapers' classic free-range activities. The reason is that the car wait equals death hysteria is emblematic of our culture's belief that kids can never be unsupervised. Even when all the evidence shows that this activity is extremely safe, it's not perfectly safe. Perfect safety is an impossible goal, but sitting in the car is safer than being driven in one. The number one way kids die or being dragged across the parking lot, even though that is what the authorities encourage parents to do. When both driving and dragging are monstrously more dangerous than a short, unsupervised car wait, and yet are not subject to societal disapproval, including arrest. It's clear we are dealing with superstition rather than rationality. It's hard to fight a deeply held superstition, but if we want to be able to raise our kids the way we see fit, and especially if we want to give them any free-range freedoms, we must fight the right to parent outside the prevailing cult of constant supervision. The cult keeps manifesting itself in shopping center parking lots, which is why I keep writing about it. And go to the reason.com. Mom lets her 3 kids wait in car. FBI agent tells her she can't. There's a link to this article. It's highlighted. The part that is highlighted is this article I wrote for Heat Street. Click that and actually read that whole article. You know, what we need to do is really focus on individual rights, you know, the rights of the families and, you know, cultures to exist. They're trying to make everything PC where whatever the people in power agree with is what you go with, but that's not freedom. I thought we're supposed to be moving towards freedom. Well, we can't have this political correctness. We can't have, well, I wouldn't leave my kids in the car for 15 minutes, so you can't. Well, I wouldn't baby my kids and shelter them, so you can't? No, well, if you want to shelter your kids, that would be your choice. I highly recommend from sheltering your kids, because it does make them a little unprepared. But that doesn't mean you can't teach them morals and, you know, respect. That way when they go out in the real world, even though they may see things that are counter that, they will have a foundation that's solid enough to be able to critically think things, and really, even if they might not agree on certain issues that you do, they're basing it on their own beliefs and critical thought into their foundation and their moral beliefs. You have a lot of inner fighting, and a lot of it kind of relates to the political correctness and the social justice warriors. And we see it in society as a whole, not just in the social justice warriors and the political correctness police. We see it in just everyday interactions with people anymore. So much hate, so much, you know, steam building up. And we're aiming it at each other because we're allowing them to divide and conquer us. And Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump ain't going to fix that. It's going to perpetrate that. It's going to create a bigger bubble. It may burst under one of them. The elites aren't going to help either, because they're just going to try to keep the system going to benefit them. We need more liberty and freedom-minded people. Maybe, hopefully, the Libertarian Party will produce something that inspires enough people to make a wave that hasn't been seen by a third party. Will it happen? I don't know. We can, hope that something happens. I want to play this short clip real quick. This was put out 3 hours ago by We Are Change, the biggest chemical attack on American citizens by their own government. I want to play this. I might have to cut it off a little quick.
Sao Paulo, Brazil, and in this video I'm going to talk about the biggest chemical attack on the American people by their very own government that will kill over 500,000 people in the next few years, and one of those people affected is myself. This all starts with the silent killer known as asbestos. It only takes 1 nanoparticle of asbestos to create asbestosis, which will create mesothelioma and lung cancer in people who are exposed to this chemical. Now, not many people know this, but the World Trade Center towers before 9/11 were filled with 400 tons of asbestos. The buildings were built by David and Nelson Rockefeller along with the Port Authority. Not only did the Port Authority have this huge liability, but also a huge problem on their hands because the Twin Towers were worth nothing. It would have costed the city $1.5 billion to get rid of the asbestos, and there was actual plans to demolish the building, since that would have been cheaper than actually going inside of the buildings floor by floor to remove this hazardous chemical within the building. There was actual demolition plans of the Twin Towers before 9/11 because of the asbestos. Now, who was responsible for the asbestos? Who was liable? Well, no one other than Dick Cheney himself. As CEO of Halliburton in 1998, he purchased Dredger's Industries, who was liable for the World Trade Center asbestos, which would then turn over the liability to Halliburton and Dick Cheney himself. The second person who was responsible was Larry Silverstein, who on July 24th, 2001, actually bought a 99-year lease of the World Trade Center tower from the Port Authority. And in his lease, he has specifically stated that if there was an act of terrorism, the new owner's obligations under the lease would be void. This was his escape clause, along with this and an insurance policy that he put on the World Trade Center towers before 9/11. He has earned billions. And I myself personally investigated this, and I asked Larry Silverstein, why would he buy these white elephants that were worth nothing, that would have costed him billions of dollars just to get rid of the asbestos? Why would he make such an unwise financial move that made no sense and had people in the industry scratching their head to why he would actually do this? And of course, we got no answer at all from Lucky Larry. We asked him also why on that fateful day when he had breakfast in Windows of the World with his daughter, with his son, who all worked at the World Trade Center, who had their daily routine of this breakfast in Windows of the World, why did all three of them not show up to work on that fateful day? Of course, stonewalled and dragged out like a criminal away from this event for even asking the questions. And of course, Larry Silverstein, even on a PBS documentary, admitting to pulling Building 7. We confronted Larry Silverstein 3 times. Now, when the buildings exploded in New York City, they sent asbestos for miles in the surrounding area, affecting everyone in New York City. And according to some estimates, there are 410,000 people who were exposed to asbestos right after 9/11. Now, of course, those numbers are a lot higher, but right after 9/11, the government came out and reassured everyone that the air was safe to breathe. There's actual documents from the EPA after studying the air at Ground Zero showing that the air was not safe to breathe. With the help of the White House, they changed that to safe to breathe. And Christy Todd Whitman then head of the EPA, was the one responsible for this on national television, lying to everyone in the area, including all the heroes of 9/11, and ultimately caused their demise. Because of this, first responders, even some that I knew who had the proper hazmat suits and had the proper gas masks to be in that area, were told not to use masks. We're told to take the masks off. My friend, Greg Quibell, who I got to know, who introduced me to his family, who opened up his house to me, we became friends. Greg Quibell suffered tremendously before dying after being on the pile in New York City after 9/11. He had to fight until his death in order to get proper medical benefits so his family wouldn't be stuck with a huge medical bill because the government denied any wrongdoing, and then on top of that denied them the basic benefits that they were entitled to under their contract as city workers. The amount of disrespect, the amount of horrendous activity by this government, not only lying to its people, but screwing them over afterwards, is despicable. Greg Quibell was an amazing human being whose life was cut short. Him and hundreds of others died prematurely. Thousands are dying right now, but we have to understand this will affect us not only now, but in the next 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. Because this asbestosis is still developing within everyone who is in the region, including myself. This is a map of the plume of the toxic smoke that came from the World Trade Center on that day. I live right here during 9/11. On the day of 9/11, there was a huge toxic plume of dust that came all over my neighborhood. You could write your name in cars with this dust. It covered everything. That smell, that dust was in my community, was in my house days, weeks, and months after 9/11. I lived in that dust after 9/11. The effects of this will hit me later on in life, as well as thousands and hundreds of thousands of other people who will also die prematurely and suffer horrible deaths. I've seen my friends die in painful, horrible ways, as the government not only denied them help, but they also denied any wrongdoing. Criminals like Christy Todd Whitman, Dick Cheney, and Larry Silverstein actually benefited from this crime, as people will suffer. This will affect everyone in that region, including myself. And knowing this is why I...
Okay, I got to pause it there because we are coming up to the end of the broadcast. And that is We Are Change Luke Rudowski talking about the dust that many people have now claimed that have killed them from respiratory issues and the asbestos that was apparently in the World Trade Centers. Go check them out. We Are Change on YouTube. Don't forget to go to ucy.tv. Scroll down to the bottom. There's an Amazon tab. Shop Amazon through ucy.tv. And it helps give a little kickback to UCY to help cover operating costs. Get the same great deals, just a little kickback for UCY. Operating costs continue to go up, and you need to be able to keep the broadcast here about freedom and liberty and bringing out information that you will not hear in the mainstream media. Again, that's ucy.tv. There's also a support tab at the top, and you can donate. Don't forget to go to antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot. Check out My Patriot Supply. Same great price, same great deals. And again, this broadcast gets a little kickback from that. And, keep fighting for freedom. Keep spreading information, because mainstream media is not covering a lot of things that are really important issues. But, Miley Cyrus or, the next celebrity to do something crazy will be the top headline. While your